today we're going to be discussing moratoriums and how it can potentially impact the real estate buying transaction. What's going on? What moratoriums are in place right now that are going to potentially impact these buyers, man? You got my ear.
Insurance, as most of the real estate professionals know right now, is, and the word I've been using, is a very turbulent industry. There's been so many changes, so many updates. And last week was a very unique situation because we had the potential of a northeastern hurricane. So the big thing about that was, a lot of these companies put what we call a moratorium in place. And if you look up the definition of a moratorium, it's essentially a delay or suspension of an activity, which sounds super scary, right? So what does that mean from an insurance standpoint? Exactly as it sounds, as an insurance agent, really any company, whether you're an agent or not, during that, potential storm last week, we weren't binding any new business. So we had, so many phone calls last week for people closing on Thursday, Friday, Monday, and we couldn't get them an insurance policy because of the fact that the moratorium was in place. And this was with most of our carriers, there really wasn't anybody writing new business during this time. I guess the more unique situation that I found last week was not only did this affect the real estate or the home insurance side, but a lot of carriers were putting the moratorium on autos too. So if you were buying a car last week or a new vehicle, you couldn't get insurance, and a lot of these companies kind of brought in the fact that, if there was any flooding, they didn't want to have to worry about claims. And that's the whole point of the moratorium, essentially, is, they don't want to have to, if we have a storm coming up the coast or something that's going to impact, a peril, right, a hurricane, we don't want to have to worry about closing on a home on a Friday. We get hit with the storm on Saturday or Sunday, and that client's filing a claim Monday. So when you think about it that way, in theory, Emilio, like, it makes sense, that's the reason why these companies do it. So that's how it can impact the real estate transaction. I think the best advice that I've given, our real estate professionals, the fact that definitely plan ahead. If you're calling us for an insurance binder, at the 11th hour for a closing, chances are there were probably some snags in the process, right?
Yeah.
I always tell, my people, try to get that insurance quote and binder as far out as you can. We can always change that for you and your client down the road. We get it. Like, closing dates are always going to change. But when we
Right.
have, a moratorium in play, yeah, man, like, our hands are super tied. And, the worst part of my job, man, is telling somebody, no, I
Yeah.
cannot help you. I'm sure the
Yeah.
same thing for you, right?
Do you think that this is something that is going to happen more often now because of the large swaths, like sums of money that they've been, pushing out there for all these destructive storms? I mean, and the cost of everything is so high.
Yeah, I do, Emilio. And again, I think it's kind of a two-part equation. I mean, look at our country as a whole and just some severe weather that we've seen. I mean, we have, the west coast of Florida getting hit with hurricanes. That typically doesn't happen. We had, the west coast of the US hit with a hurricane a few weeks back. Again, like, we're seeing some stuff that, from a weather standpoint, and I'm no meteorologist by any means,
Yeah.
but just some very wonky weather. And again, this is kind of the point of having insurance. It's there when you need it. You kind of have to expect these things to happen. But I just think with the frequency of this very unique weather and the patterns we've seen, I do think that we'll see some moratoriums. I wouldn't say more frequently, but they're going to pop up,
Yeah.
and it's just something we have to be prepared for.